I'm now joined by Brother Hugh Mayers. Hugh Mayers is a counselor, psychotherapist, and mental health trainer who currently works with disaffected adolescent boys from the inner cities, helping them on the journey to manhood in a Rites of Passage mentoring program. Now, Hugh listened to what these young men had to say, and he has his particular opinions on the conversation. He will be expressing his thoughts and opinions, talking about psychotherapy, what it means, what led him to the calling of being a psychotherapist. He'll be talking about rites of passage, its origins, how it operates, and how he uses ancient wisdom principles and practices in a modern context to help young Black men transition from childhood to manhood. Brother Hugh, welcome to the show.
Hey, Zuri, how you doing? You okay?
I'm really good. So glad to have you here. Brother, you are a psychotherapist and you also run a Rites of Passage mentoring program. So we're going to speak about the Rites of Passage mentoring program momentarily. But can I ask you, Hugh, to explain what is psychotherapy?
Okay, so psychotherapy is one of the models of or a method of talking therapy. So it's basically when you really boil it down, because there are many models, there's different versions of how people implement different types of strategies, and they come from different, we would say, ideas. They're based on different ideas. But if you really boil down psychotherapy, it's that usually human beings have psychological and emotional dis-ease from various points in their life, right? And from time immemorial, we would share those problems with somebody who it was their calling or their vocation. It could have been the vicar, and before the vicar, it could have been the sheikh, and before the sheikh, it could have been the holy man from the village, right? You have different sages you have throughout the ages, and sometimes they're men and sometimes they're women, but there's people that throughout various societies around the world and various times in history, from time immemorial, who would be the shaman, for example, right? These, you would go and speak with them about your issue. Sometimes they might give you something medicinal or a ritual to perform or something to do, but a lot of it involved speaking. But as we hit the industrial age and with society became more secular, they took away, for a large part, the kind of spiritual and sort of religious aspect sometimes that exist in talking to another human being about your life stresses, and they modeled it on ideas related to the psychological path and the emotional path, or sometimes the behavioral path as well, like helping people to model new behaviors, change their behaviors, change the way they feel, change the way they think. Not always in that order, but that's what psychotherapy is really about.
Okay. So, why did you choose to be a psychotherapist?
Psychotherapy chose me.
Okay.
Chose me. It called me. So, this is a long story, but I'm going to give you the radio version, right? The version, right? So, graduated from law school, graduated from university in law.
Okay.
Did a master's in politics, and intended to go to law school to become a lawyer, right?
Okay.
Life circumstances, family circumstances meant I couldn't apply in time to go to law school to finish off to become a barrister, right? Or a solicitor.
Okay.
And it so happens that, I mean, I've always wanted to work with young people in the legal profession, right? That was my idea, that I was going to work with young people, our people, many people from our community, young people who get caught up in the criminal justice system. So that was my idea of how I'm going to reach them, right?
Yeah.
And help them and provide service to this demographic. But it so happened that some sisters, some young ladies that were career advisors, career consultants, they directed me to some opportunities in HMP Feltham.
Okay.
Yeah. And I made an attempt to get some work there, but I was told, nice CV, but you haven't got no work experience.
Yeah.
We're just out of uni and when you got no work experience in this field, because I originally come from the building site, right? So I haven't got no, buildings. I don't have work experience outside of that. I just finished university. So Applied for some voluntary work. It was taking long to be processed, to open up the space for me. And in a long story short, the same lady showed me an opportunity to do work in safeguarding in the same institution, same place, right? Just a different department. All right. Went for the job, didn't get a job. Liked my CV, liked my throwdown, but again, no work experience. And then lo and behold, they called me some months later and said, well, not months later, but sometime after, and said, actually, there's another vacancy that's opened up in safeguarding. And would you like to join the team? And I'm sort of saying, oh, is this to do with race relations? They say, no, we don't know nothing about race relations, but do you want a paid job, an employment job in safeguarding, right? And so I said, yeah, obviously, yeah. And safeguarding sounds like a nice word. It's a very, catch-all word, and it means keeping people safe. But in the prison, when I actually got there and put boots on ground, I got to find out now what they call this in the prison is suicide watch. This role is where people will cut up themselves when they're not coping with life, and they cut up themselves or harm themselves physically in ways to deal with pain, to deal with emotional anguish or distress. Or sometimes in that institution, young men will feel so much despair, such intense despair, they might attempt to end their life.
Yeah.
And so the role that I was hired to do was to be a case manager, caseworker, and work with the young men who are suicidal, assess them, risk manage them, have one-to-one sessions with them. And still wasn't a psychotherapist then, but a colleague went on a training course for counseling, and he hated it. He hated the course. And he just said that was a group of women just complaining about men, and he was the only guy in that environment. Manager turned to me and said, the budget's still there, right? The budget's still there. If you want an afternoon off work, you could try, go along to, I'm booking on a course and whatever, and see how you get along, because we got budget for it. In the good old days when money was flowing at that time, right? I said, I'll give it a shot. And from the first day, from the first session, from the first 2-3 minutes of interacting with the class, my peers, straight away, I knew, boom, this is what I want to do.
So this was a call.
That was my journey and this was my journey into counselling, and then counselling after qualifying, then going on to do psychotherapy.
Right, so there's a number of things that I want to pick up on, actually. But you listened to the young brothers, heard what they had to say, and clearly those brothers do not fit the stereotype that is perpetuated about young Black men. Mm-hmm. At the same time, you've had experience in prisons where you've seen very disaffected young Black men. And I know that your mentoring program connects you with disaffected young Black men. So for you, what is the reality of young Black men in this society?
That's a brilliant question. There's two sides to the coin, right? There's two sides to the coin, but one side, when you flip it, it tends to land on a particular side more often than not. This is just my subjective take. I would say that there is, in a country like Britain, a country like the UK, right, there is going to be, for historical reasons, levels of, not in every area of life all the time, but there's going to be levels of institutionalized or structural or, systemic systems in place, right? Levels of racism towards Black people in general, Black men in particular, because the males of any group generally are seen through, if you're looking through the lens of power and policy and protection and politics, right? The males will be the main target to restrict, to cull, to contain, to control, right? We need to control these men. It could be, in one society, it might be European Jewish men at a certain time in history. Another time it can be, I'm trying to say, men who are from Eastern Europe, when the Serbs and the Croats are fighting, whoever's winning, they're grabbing the men to put them in barns and mass slaughter, whatever the case may be. In America, you've got lynchings in the South. They're lynching men, right? Predominantly. So in this country, there's that systemic racism that, and a certain level of pressure and discrimination that young Black men or Black men in general will be under. But if you turn the coin over, and this is a heavier side for me, it's the self-perception, the internalized racism, my disregard for anybody unconsciously, right, who looks like me, who reminds me of me. That level of internalized hostility at times, right, is to me much more powerful. And when I say much more powerful, as much as I believe, yeah, there are white people in positions of power who control jet planes and billion-pound budgets, and they have an army at the tip of their finger and a police force and various organizations, right? They have power. That's levels of power. But call me a dreamer. But I believe that our personal power and what we choose to accept and how we choose to carry ourselves and how we choose to identify and operate is much more powerful than any lever of white supremacy racism. So history's shown us, when we've chosen to opt out of their games,
Yeah.
right, and walk a different path with no budget, with no army, with no jet planes and no bombers, right, and no mass media, just opt out of their game. And we've discombobulated the system in wicked ways. You see, in the 60s, when people would say, I'm not going to perm my hair no more, I'm going to just wear afro. We start saying, Queen, you look beautiful today. I love your hair like that. I'm not trying to hit on you. I don't need your number or anything like that. But I'm just admiring your intrinsic beauty. Young King, I dig your style, man. More power to you, Young King. Just our energy, just change, just shifting our frequency. And in the UK, we had that when Bless Empress and Ray Ray. We have our own expression of Black pack empowerment at the different times, right? In Britain and the Caribbean. When we operate like that, we discombobulate the system in a different way. And so, bring it one point, I think how Black men see themselves is more important. How Black men see other Black men is more important. Yeah. What their aspirations are is more important. So I've been on the sharp end, as in I've boots on the ground. I've seen right up close. I've worked with young men, and this is just real. This is not like me saying it in glamorized way, because it's not glamorous. It's pretty sad. But sat in a room, seen a man come back from court, young Black man come back from court, and I'm trying to check him every evening, but he's coming back from court late. And one evening I went to check in on him, and he said, yeah, he's back in his room and he's come back from court. I didn't need to ask him how the court case is going when I opened his cell door. As he sat in his chair and he looked up at me, it was real in the field. I looked on his face, and his face said, I don't know how long I'm going to be here in these type of institutions. I'm going to be locked away, but I'm going to be here for a long time. Before he spoke, before he opened his mouth. And then that's when all the rap videos and the excitement and the champagne and the woo and manabad, all that evaporated into the air. This is now real life.
All right. So, wow. So I'm just going to try and connect what you said with what the young brothers were saying. Because one of the things that they talked about was essentially a loss of identity, the need to pivot and adjust and switch to particular environments in order to negate particular perceptions, fears that people have about them, or on the other hand, to meet particular perceptions about who they should be. And I just want to ask you, as a psychotherapist, what impact does that have on a young Black brother psychologically?
I think that it would be, generally speaking, it would be exhausting. I can imagine that being exhausting. People feeling like if they're being, what's the word I'm looking for, like incongruent, or they're not, they might feel like a level of guilt. Like, am I really being authentic? So that might be something that an individual, a brother a youngster could be wrestling with.
Yeah.
And I say particularly young, and I put emphasis on young, because as you are growing from, teenager and puberty and this type of age, as a young man, as individuals, but as a young man, since we're focusing on men, right, and males, you're forming your personality, right? You're evolving your personality, right? Your proven track record of being effective or successful or competent, right? It's forming. You haven't got that behind you.
Yeah.
Right? You lack a certain level of life experience. So certain things to navigate in your younger teens, your early 20s, is going to be much more challenging. Even if you're facing some of the same obstacles, you navigate them and speed through them easy when you're 25 plus or 30 plus. As you get older, it just comes with the territory. But at a younger age, when you're uncertain about yourself, that could bring up things of struggle and emotionally taxing. But I just want to use a phrase that I heard a young man use, and you raised in the when we spoke when it was spoken about code switching.
Yeah.
Most people do.
Yeah.
Most people do. If you know, for example, white young men that may be from Essex, and they speak, like a street mate and all that, right? They speak casual with their friends, yeah? But some of them have got city jobs. Some of them work in Canary Wharf. They don't speak like that at board meetings. They're code switching. Are they sold out? Are they being disingenuous?
Yeah.
Or a fake or a phony? Or is it just that this is the language of the workspace? And so when I'm interfacing with members of the public on behalf of the business, or whether I'm in a meeting with my fellow professionals, I just conduct myself in an appropriate fashion.
Yeah.
Right? No big deal. But when you're young and you've come out of your teens and that, and the black and who's a coon and a tom and and all these different expectations that, guys can really have some psychological baggage from just having to say, I'm gonna be a professional. So it's tough. So yeah, it could be tough. It could be tough.
And I think one of the things that came out of the discussion, and one of the things that really concerns me, is the influences that are now impacting on men generally, but particularly on young black men. So there's, what is now described as the manosphere.
Is it young black men? I want to question you, Zuri. I want to question, is it particularly on young black men? Because I'm in space with white boys too and Asian boys too as well. I mean,
I get you. I hear that it's affecting for men.
I would say young men are magnetized by some of these individuals. It's said across the board.
I hear you. And I mean, I suppose the moral of the story is that there is a lack of identity as to what manhood means generally. There's been clearly a major shift in gender roles, some for the good, some not for the good. But it would appear that alongside the shift that has benefited women, there hasn't been a corresponding shift, and this is just my theory, as to how men ought to adapt to this changing environment. And focusing in particularly on young black men, I'm just wanting your opinion as to how all of these influences, the Andrew Tates of the world, the manosphere, the red pill, blue pill scenario, how that is impacting your
kind of pill.
Eh?
That's it, every kind of pill.
All kind of pill, massa. Green pill.
Yeah. So red pill, right? From the movie, the metaphor is taken from the movie Matrix, and from the idea of if you take the red pill, we could take you down a rabbit hole where you be told the truth, some unpleasant truths, or you could take the blue pill and just carry on your life in the illusion, right? So I guess that's where the metaphor comes from, and the manosphere, play on words, men, and the stratosphere, right, or atmosphere. That's what manosphere. So we have manosphere. From my working with young people, from listening to information online, but definitely from personal account, from sitting in circles with young black men or being in a school environment and hearing the conversations that go on amongst the boys, right, growing into young men, I would say, again, anecdotal and personal experience, but just my personal opinion, right? And it'd be really interesting to have some research in this type of area, right? Is that, as you said, there's been a shift in certain spheres of society with recognition and encouragement for girls, right, and women to play more of a part in public life, in education, right, in politics, and different fields, right, high-powered fields. And it's been a thing for the better in society in terms of that in some respects, the emergence of more women in public life, right, and open up the educational space for women. That's been a really good thing. But where the problem lies is that there has been, boys have been underachieving, right, in certain fields, in terms of education, higher education, right? And black boys, right, falling off the edge of a cliff in some, if you look at some numbers. Custodial settings, antisocial behavior, criminal record, mental health. There's we got certain statistics about men, and that really apply to young black men and boys. the mainstream hasn't really given an answer that is satisfactory to the young boys, and they have a need. It's a legitimate need. They're angry, a lot of them. They're legitimate in their anger, right? How one chooses to express their anger is a choice, and it could be for the better or for the worse. You know, you could be angry and you could act like a warrior where there's a code, right? And you channel your energy. Or you could be angry and you act like a savage where anyone at any time can get it, and you're just explosive, right? And you're destructive, you're not constructive. So that's where it's at. But I think the power and the potency, and this is a problem with really addressing the issue with boys, is that the people in the manosphere speak to them and speak to their feelings.
Yeah.
Because men and boys have feelings. And they speak to them about emotion, or they address their emotional discontent, right? They address it specifically, right? And they speak to them as if they are human beings worthy, right? And on top of that, a lot of the arguments in the manosphere and the stratosphere and the manosphere and the red pill movement, a lot of the arguments they use are based on research and statistics, but this narrative that they tell isn't necessarily pleasant for the mainstream. This doesn't mean I co-sign everything that every man in the manosphere has said. Do you know what I mean? Or any red pill has said. Some of them say bizarre things, or they have weird ways of putting their points across, right? But a lot of the information can be backed up by data. So the boys are looking for answers. You in the mainstream are saying that girls are made of sugar and spice and everything nice, and boys are made of snails and puppy dog tails, or whatever the nursery rhyme is. Yeah. But the boys are saying, I don't really feel like that. Yeah. I feel like I'm worthy. I'm intrinsically, inherently good or human, or have the capacity to grow to be amazing. And that's what the red pill is agreeing with. So I'm gonna go listen to that red pill, because you're just telling me about double standards in school, in the space that we're in. Life must have double standards, because men and women are not exactly the same. But I don't know about this rejigging. This double standards ain't really working for me.
Yeah.
And so that's where the attraction for the red, because they're speaking to them. The boys are living for experiences like this. Anecdote: girl and boy have verbal altercation in class, right?
Yeah.
Boy says, you want to go back to the kitchen and go and make some food, right? You're a woman, you're whatever, right? He said some misogynist stuff, or, sexually, not misogynist, not hatred for him, but, it's childish but biased and not appropriate statements, right? It's just a put down, like how she would say, look by your lip or look by your shoes, or girls are very good at the word game, right?
Yeah.
So he gets chastised for that. And he's reminded that, girls are equal to boys, and if girls want to be career women and footballers, so we're all equal. So we're not having none of that gender talk around here, right? Check him for that. Cool. Another boy and a girl have a verbal altercation against each, because boys and girls, boys and boys, it's kids, they're in a space. From time to time, it gets tense. The girl raises up, scratches him in his face and scars him in his face.
Yeah.
And he's sent to reflection. He's sent to the reflection room. It's just eyes, man. And she's in class kicking it.
So what? He was sent to a reflection room. He was.
Yeah. So he's sent to reflection.
Yeah.
And she's back in class in science, kicking it, doing the algebra. Yeah, Mr. Algebra, doing biology, chemistry. Yeah, right. The periodic table, like normal. But he's sent to reflection. Now these are adults that are not wicked that did that. They got in for boys, but there's a trend. There's an ideological trend. There's like a what do you call it? Radicalist feminist trend, right? So that boys are saying, wait, that don't seem right. If we're in these things happen. I don't think the adults pay attention, and how these small battles eat away at the morale of boys, or how they say, do you know what? You're saying this as adults in the front of the assembly, but I'm going to check out Andrew Tate later on, or I'm going to watch a Kevin Samuels video because he's saying something that speaks to me, and you're telling me to get scratchy in my face and just to own it because I'm a boy, but we're all equal. It's my face.
I mean, that is...
And people think, oh, no, this is... You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And there's many of those things, those discrepancies happen daily. I think adults are battling. The adults are in charge of children, battling to try and regulate. Yeah, we want to open up space, but how do we sort of keep it fair? Oh, this is the other point I want to make along this line as well. I tell you what, the other reason why they became so popular amongst young men it loses. This is my theory. It loses something that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, sexual development, or should I say cognitive development amongst the sexes, right? Girls, from young age, they could use a pair of scissors better than a little boy when they're like 5, or, a certain motor skills, cognitive skills. Girls mature on a certain level. So when it comes to things like language, relationship competency, hierarchy in friendship groups and values and things of this nature, girls are much more sophisticated than boys. Much more, right? And, or at least the way that they're able to articulate themselves and express themselves. Generally speaking, girls will be better with the wordplay, right?
Yeah.
And there's been a gender debate going on amongst adults. Children watch the adults. So the kids have their back and forth in the children's spaces. The boys were getting eviscerated for years, getting annihilated for years. And there's always this thing like, men are violent. The woman, when it comes down to a conversation, if the woman's challenging the man and his man was challenged, you will get violent on her. He will usually, because he run out of words, he gets aggressive. That was a stereotype. But now these guys are hearing Andrew Tate say, or these different influencers, like I'm not going to keep mentioning him per se, but what was Kevin Sanders or whatever saying, there's an 80-20 rule, that 80% of women are attracted to 20% of, or these different facts and figures which come out of research. They're equipping these boys to go back on the playground, and then they're going to argue their point now from masculinity. If you're a feminist, I'm a masculinist. I'm going to argue from my point of view.
Yeah.
And because they're lighting up some of the girls, they're giving them some arguments that make them feel, they didn't say, it was unfactual, it's unfounded in science, but it's, miss, we didn't like he said, So then this causes a problem as well.
Because the impression that I get is that young people generally are being bombarded with so many different messages that, irrespective of the rightness or wrongness of the message, they basically don't know, there's no direction for them, which is why I now want to turn to rites of passage. So can I ask you to explain what is rites of passage?
Okay, rites of passage is in a nutshell what you would call a ritual process, right? It's ritual process. From ancient times in different civilizations, you would have certain rituals and processes where boys were called to manhood by older men. That you are, just like you have an organization like a fraternity, and you have to go through an initiation process. You have to fulfill certain criteria. Certain organizations have, okay, to become a member, you need to do X, Y, and Z in this fashion in front of us as a body of leadership, and you haven't fulfilled the criteria. You need to return and come back in 2 months' time to do it again. Oh, you've done it successfully. You are now part of us. You are part of this fraternity or this organization. So ritual process is talking about, in different societies, the men in that particular society will call the boys to manhood. So there's a process. There's a number of psychological or physical or spiritual challenges they must go through. They learn particular lessons. They learn these various lessons along the way.
Yeah.
They've passed this test. And then now, after they've been through this process, they've passed this test, they are now recognized as men. At this particular junction, now, there's no such thing as adolescence when you're in between, where you're, buying pop records or going to a Jay-Z concert, and you're neither man nor boy. No. Yesterday you left here as a boy, you left the village as a boy, but you completed the task and you came back at the end of the weekend. We took you away from your mum, and for whether it's 48 hours or 72 or whatever, you've come back now. This guy is only 2 days older, but he's now a man.
Yeah.
So that's what rites of passage is. It's taking boys through a process or a number of processes to switch on the higher self, to help them to learn. In my case, what I'm doing, and me and my colleagues are doing, helping them to improve on their relationship skills, right? Because relationships are a part of life, whether romantic or familial or friendship, right? For them to have emotional regulation, because we all feel despair at times, or angry, or anxious, or whatever the case may be. So emotional regulation, self-awareness, learning about how my interactions impact others, and also knowing about how I'm doing, having a register. A lot of boys are not given the equipment. A lot of us, as men, even when we were boys, we wasn't given the equipment of how to be self-aware emotionally. So what we learned to do is to push our emotions down and suppress our emotions. And that's why you'll find a lot of men experience like some sort of emotional numbness.
Yeah.
or women will speak about men they've been in relationships with, romantic relationships, saying about, the man not being emotionally available. It wasn't because he was inherently evil or he had something against it. He could have liked to the end of the world, but sometimes he couldn't access. He didn't know how he was thinking or feeling. He wasn't available for himself, so he couldn't really show up emotionally present for her. And so we try to instill in the boys this self-awareness as well. So that's sort of key. I want to say they're competencies, they're skills, right? That we can build on, and improve. So I'll give you an example. Like one of the values that we teach is integrity, right? Being a person of your word, right? As young men, being a person of your word. But the lesson in it isn't to be in integrity in every area of your life, in every, throughout every day of the year. Because we've got so many different relationships. We've made commitments. We've said things. I'm going to be on time to my manager. My mom wants to see me on Sunday. My daughter wants me to take her shopping. My son said this. My mate, I told him I'd help him fix it. Sometimes we fall out of integrity, right? We're going to struggle with that for the rest of our lives as human beings. The challenge is to say, can I be honest with myself? When I brush my teeth at night and I look in the mirror, can I look in the mirror and say, hey, this is the area I've been out of integrity in. I need to own that, take accountability and own that and something that I can work on and I can improve that relationship and be more solid on my word,
So, because my understanding of rites of passage, and I do that, say it as a mother of a son who has undergone rites of passage, is it's commonplace in quote unquote in indigenous societies that follow particular principles, and there is an expectation that young men generally will go through this process. So, as a young boy is growing up, he's aware that there'll come a point in time that he'll have to undertake a rite of passage in whatever form it takes. So, the rites of passage that you are involved in, is it based on those similar principles, or do you kind of extrapolate ancient principles to the current environment?
It is based on ancient principles, like the values I've mentioned. It's based on these values, for example, these pivotal values. Accountability, ancient. Integrity, ancient. Self-determination, ancient. Visionary goal setting, having a vision in life. What do you want to accomplish? How do you intend to get there? What are the steps? And respect for womanhood. It's based on those principles. However, because there are young men from various backgrounds, it predominantly tends to be black and mixed race, right? 80% black and mixed race. But there's young men from different backgrounds. So there's something that we all share as men in our manhood. And so there is a universal element to it. Those values are pretty universal. But also it takes into account that the young man must be self-defining. What kind of man do you want to be? Because if we were dealing with it from an ancient ethnic, I'm in with my family, like South America. We're in South America, right? And so this environment, this ethnic group, these clans and tribes, they got a particular value system. So it will be tailored to that, right? Or if we were in the Congo, it will be slightly different. Or if it was in East Africa, it might be slightly different, right? However, we're in an industrialized society with multi-ethnic, you know what I mean? White Anglo-Saxon boy sitting in the room, Pakistani brother sitting in the room, African brother who just came from the Congo a year and a half ago and his English isn't the best, is in the room. A little Jamaican of Caribbean heritage in the room, and there's all these different mixed race. But so it's more like, what kind of man do you want to be, right? And what is important to you, because you got to define that manhood for yourself. But if we were dealing with it from what you're saying, like in that, if it was a geographical rites of passage, it would take on probably a geographical, regional, and that societal model would influence it more. But because we're dealing with young people from different spheres and strands of cultures, we try to like tap in on the universal principles about manhood, but then there's an element for them to define, like to say, okay, in my culture, it's for men to be a provider and a protector. So I'm from a traditional culture, so sir, Mr. Mayor, I got to really work hard. I got to make these grades happen because my parents are going to be coming to me expecting me to get married when I'm 22. So I'm going to support you on that, on your trying to work on your grades, whereas somebody else might come from another environment and say, for being a man, for me, we're not into that traditional stuff, right? We're men and women and we're equal. And I just want to be a good partner to the woman that I choose, or I just want to be a better son to my mum and hold my word to my mum. So I'm going to support you in that. I'm not going to charge you to be this way or that way because it's your vision for your manhood.
And what does it look like in practice for these young boys? Are there tasks that they have to undertake, or is it specific to their particular needs?
All right, I can tell you a bit about the curriculum, because there's a curriculum and then there's process. So there's a curriculum, there's certain discussions related to manhood, and the power of the circle, of sitting in the circle. It starts with the sessions start with a check-in, like an emotion. It allows you to arrive in the space, and it's like an emotional barometer of where you're feeling at the start of the session. And we usually have a similar check-out process where we check it. We check it out, stating how we're feeling at the moment. There's actual lessons that are based on lectures. It's me speaking to them, and reading to them or giving them information about manhood, then answer them certain questions. But at another time, it might involve role play, dramatization of a scenario. Or at another time, we might watch a video and then pause the video and then have a discussion about what's come up on a particular video. But the most important part is the process, because no lesson will look the same, because it's very much about the subjective element is about the young men that's in the room. So you're in a space with one set of young men. I go by past experience from like other schools I worked in, and then somebody might mention the kids got this thing what they call G-check, right? He was G-checked, man. He got G-checked. It's basically somebody older, bully, a thug, right? Will step up on step towards a kid and want to take their phone from them or something like that, right? You might have a circle where somebody comes in and speaks about an experience that was daunting for them, where they were set upon or they felt fear, and that could become the whole lesson about how that affected them and what do they take, there's a whole conversation related to that. Or somebody's got relationship issues. They've got a girlfriend in the school or out of the school, but this is what's happened. This is what their fear is, or this is their pain. And meeting the young people where they are, it's not for me to say, I'm a middle-aged man, and what do you know about love? He's human. He developed feelings for this, we can call it puppy love, right? He's developed feelings for her, and his heart is hurting him. Is he going to study well? Is he focused in class? Or is it better to give him a space to, kind of process what's going on for him? So they bring stuff from outside in their own life experiences to process in a space as well.
And what impact does it have on you, on seeing these men from the start of Rites of Passage to the conclusion? What's the difference for them?
I think I've seen young men mature, right? Sometimes children just get older, and even grown men, we just say him just get big, him just big. But I've seen, like, what's the phrase I'm looking for? Like, emotional maturity. The type of, or the level of conversation that I will have with them. I've seen growth on that more. It's one thing memorizing your exams, math, science, all that stuff is good, right? But I've seen these guys learn how to regulate themselves as well, where, I would have flipped out, or I could approach this situation in a particular way that would be destructive for me, right? And I've seen how a lot of them have become more equipped to stand up to adults and challenge adults, but do it in a way that's respectful.
Yeah.
The most that could happen is that they would say, no, I'm not going to change the tension, or, okay, they've heard him now, because the attitude is not there and the disrespect is not there and the whining is not there, but it's more like I'm focused on making sure that this lady or this man understands my point, that I wasn't in it wrong, and this is my perspective. And in the least, you've commanded them to respect you. So yeah, I've definitely seen growth, and some academic attainment has gone up in the schools that we work in, and less antisocial behavior, like less things like manage moves and suspensions and that. But it's not magic. It's not hot sauce. These children come with so much going on in their life. Sometimes you work with some young people and they still end up in, they still end up being moved schools because of poor behavior. It can happen. It can happen. You can't rescue it, but there's no magic sauce that, like, it's just a work in progress. It's definitely just a work in progress. But I'm honored to share space with them, and I'm educated continuously by them.
And because I know that you're based in the Southeast, so, I mean, I'm not sure the extent to which Rites of Passage is familiar in the UK amongst our community. But what would your recommendations be for parents who have young boys and who are having issues, behavioral issues? What would your recommendation be as to how they can effect positive change for their young boys?
I would say to try and encourage them to get into programs that might teach them a number of skills, but one of them pivotal skills is about self-awareness and about emotional regulation. Sometimes Black boys are perceived, or the starting point is of them being a problem, and they need fixing. They're like, almost like, it's implicitly like they're inherently broken, and if we don't intervene, that brokenness is going to spill onto other people and harm girls and harm old people and the criminal. And that's an awful proposition. I think that we should start from the premise that these young Black boys are potential geniuses, giants, thinkers, influencers, movers and shakers of tomorrow. And if we invest in them in the right way, they can arrive at their potential. If we start from that premise, I think it's a different mindset, and then we're empowering them because we're calling them by their name. We're saying to them, "Hey, man, but you're a genius, right? You're a giant, and I'm surprised that you're not doing what giants do. You're acting smaller. This is not you. You're calling them from a different place."
Yeah.
I
mean, it's interesting because I was speaking with some friends about, growing up. Well, I mean, I think myself, but growing up.
I just say middle age, a generic term. I just threw it out.
But I can remember growing up in the 60s, 70s, 80s, because I moved to Jamaica in the 80s with my parents. But growing up here, there clearly was a significant amount of racism. But I felt very safe in my community. And I think largely because the Black community was in a defined geographical space. So there was almost strength in numbers as opposed to where I think we're much more dispersed now. Whereas I think nowadays there isn't that same sense of security. And I think particularly for young Black males having to grapple with what it means to be a man and having to, that lack of understanding of what it means to be actually, that's something we should address, actually. So for you, as a psychotherapist and as a adult Black male, what does it mean to be a Black man?
Depends on where you ask that question. But I think the first thing that it comes to mind is potential to genius, untapped. Black male, father of civilization, father of humanity. There's lots of, origin. There's lots of things that come to mind if you just ask a question. I also throw some words out. But I'd also add some word that's, adolescent, inner child, damaged, unresolved, scared.
Yeah.
So there's these different attributes and qualities or emotional states that exist in the same individual.
Yeah.
But there is all of those are relevant. It's like there's there's a documentary online. It's called The Work. It's from the United States.
The Work or the
Work? The Work.
Work. Okay.
Yeah, and it's about a prison intervention. It takes place like annually where these volunteers, they go in there with a facilitator and they go into the prison and they spend like about 2 days, about 48 hours or 72 hours or something like that. Sleep there, everything in the dorm with all the guys, right?
Yeah.
And they have these different circles, discussion circles, where they talk about their offense or they talk about their issues, their anger. And there was some violent, and I'm going to say it one more time, violent men there for very horrific offenses, right? Latin, African American, white, working class, right? Underclass white guys and that. But there was something common in amongst them when they was having their conversations, and some of these circles got heavy and very emotional and stuff like that. But all I could see was, I want my dad. That's all that was screaming out at me. I want my dad. So much of it was related to absentee fathers, or didn't have access to my father. I didn't know what was going on at the time, but my mom kept me away from my father. Or my father didn't have so whatever the cause was, but or my dad was in the house, but he never really spoke to me.
Yeah.
He just came home and sat and read his paper and didn't want to be disturbed. But the importance of fathers is so undermined. It's so taken for granted, like, it's no big deal. It's a big deal. Society's paying for it.
Yeah.
Society's paying for it. So, and the reason why I brought it up is in line with your question about what is a man, because that thing about fear and the role of a father, because we all have fears as human beings, right? But the father is the one that, and this doesn't mean mom cannot do it, but mom can't do it like how dad can do it, right?
Yeah.
The father is the one that helps the son, that teaches the son how to navigate some of these different battles, challenges, right? Issues that he'll come up against. As a male, he will model certain behavior, right? He'll challenge him, right? He might give him tough love, right? Hold boundaries. Yeah, these some of the things that are quite absent from a lot of young men's lives as well.
And I think the sad thing is that, and I'm not sure the extent to which this is representative, but when you listen to what the conversations are on social media between men and women, it's a battle at the expense of the young people. But it reminds me of that African saying that when the elephants fight? When elephants fight, it's the grass that gets pounded. Something like, we can't remember this saying, but effectively, that when you're having this battle, but between the genders, you're forgetting about the impact that it's having on the young people.
It's some of in the gender war. Sorry to cut across, but some of the stuff what I hear mentioned online in the gender war, I'm trying to clean my analytics because I don't want that stuff to pop up in my my Facebook feed or my YouTube feed no more, because it is, and from the Black perspective, it's veered off into hatred.
Yes,
it's veered off into hatred, and I think for African Americans, for African Caribbean people in particular, who was, those were the descendants of the transatlantic slave trade, right? We've got some conversations to be had in private, some difficult conversations. And I don't think the internet is always the best place, because I think we need healing circles.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, your brother.
Where we want to address each other, want to appreciate each other, we want to hold each other accountable.
Yeah.
We might have, like I said, difficult things to cover, right? But having these conversations in I would say, an unsafe space with a comment section is breeding hatred. And I know that there were people that will compare us to other communities and say, well, there's mainstream people, like white men and women, for example, that have these conversations that everybody else does. And I don't disagree with that. But it's just like saying, in some in some communities, it might have like gun laws, but people say, oh, you know what? They lock their firearm away, right? And they take it to go hunting and then they put it away. So other people have firearms. That's one thing. But having dysregulated emotional men who say, they're carrying guns around in the inner cities is different. I say, but it's all firearms. It's gun law. It's free. No, it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing.
Yeah.
So if there are Black people holding space and having these conversations in the public, there are some that are more tempered or publicly appropriate in their tone and the kind of conversation that they're having, no problem. But we got a lot of dysregulated anger and mommy issues and daddy issues showing up as relationship talk. No, it's not relationship talk, man. This is you vomiting out your pain, and your pain is legitimate.
Yeah, because that's what it is, isn't it? It's an expression of your own pain and hurt and trauma.
Yeah, and I think your pain is legitimate, but there's an appropriate place for it.
Yeah,
not everything is for public consumption.
Yeah, so and like you say, it's a conversation in the absence of someone that's skilled and knowledgeable to manage that conversation and the issues that arise from it. So it just becomes basically a confrontation. It's not even a conversation, it's a confrontation.
Yeah. We confront it because the thing is, when I do tend to look at these conversations and when they come up and I watch some of them, I'm like, as much as the vitriol or the meanness, I'm like, all you're really showing me is that because of the passion, that there is love, but you don't know how to express it, or there's just unmet needs. Yeah. But it's not. It kind of looks like hatred to the blind eye, to the naked eye. It will look like hatred, so it's not a good look. But I know that deep is like, all I mean is women say these mean things about men, and it's like they're saying, I want to be loved and I want to be appreciated. And then the guys are saying meaner things to the women, and it's like, I want to know how to love you, but I'm scared. You know, I'm scared because if you was to shout out my love, I don't know how to recover.
Yeah.
So I'm scared too. So it's two frightened people. I mean, like if you see two young people that have a confrontation and two of them don't want to fight, they're scared. That's our book. But they say the most wickedest things, but really, they don't want to fight. They don't want it, right? But they don't know how to say, look, right, long, do we need to do this? Should we just shake hands and call it a good afternoon and move on? But nobody wants to seem the weaker person. So, if we just cortisol levels, the stress hormones going through the roof. But it's unnecessary. You have to find another way of, I think this is an era now. What we'll be pioneering is if you could have men and women, even couples, for example, that married couples or couples that have been in long-term relationships and that are committed, to kind of like share, okay, we have these challenges, but we're here on the sofa, we're together side by side as a team. Just sharing some of our experiences and our insight. Like, we bring it down a little bit, bring the pace down a little bit.
Yeah.
Because the easier thing, it's like when people are in a relationship and you have a disagreement with your beloved, right? The easier thing, especially in Black culture, I don't know about Chuck, me? Yep. We go to that place of anger, but it's just a mask. It's a masquerade, right? The harder place to go is to say, hey, I want to hear what you're saying, man. I want to appreciate. I want to be able to understand what you're saying, because you are important and what you have to say is important. You know what I mean? You don't have to agree with everything the person says. You might still have to, but give them that grace.
Yeah.
But we find that sometimes it's not the go-to. The go-to is, nah, man, I just told it, what? You're good. Is that what she said to you? I would have did. Yeah. We need.
Because you know what, Hugh? I think sometimes it's in those actions that people find their power, but it's a false power.
Yeah.
Because when you've been so dehumanized, so demasculated, so oppressed, you will often find power in the perverse, through your sexual behavior, through violent means. And I often think that that's a reflection of that lack of power, that authentic internal power. Hugh, I'm just conscious of time, so I just want to ask one final question. What would you say to parents? Actually, two questions. What would you say to parents raising young boys as to what they can most effectively do to help cultivate their emotional well-being? And what would you also say to young boys who are struggling, young Black boys who are struggling with their sense of self?
Wow, tough. You asked me some tough questions, but I'll try and keep it brief, yeah?
You think it was going to be easy?
I thought it would be easy, but two tough questions. But yeah, I think to parents, my advice would be, and I think I alluded to it earlier, is to try and get their young men involved in programs or interventions or processes that will help them to deal with, in particular, their self-awareness and their emotional regulation, you know, and that would affect other aspects of their life, their relationship building skills. But being able to be aware of what's going on for me, why it's going on for me, how it's affecting me, yeah, and how I regulate my emotions, because even if it's anger, I have a right to be angry at times. I'm a human organism. But just being aware that anger can be expressed as a savage or a warrior. It could be constructive, where I use that energy to do something that was not going to harm me or my loved ones or anybody, or I can use that energy where the energy is using me, it's out of control, and that can land me in difficult situations. So I would encourage parents to, you know, direct their young men to that kind of environment or that type of process. And I would say to the young men who might be finding it challenging right now in their life, that to be challenged is a part of life, that you're not alone and you're not defective, right? You are unique, you are valuable intrinsically, like inherently, just because of who you are valuable, and you have a untapped potential that I would hope that you're able to actually realize, like come into contact with your goals, what you dream for your future. You know, set your goals high and give it your best shot, because I believe in you. I love you and I believe in you.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate what you've had to say. I appreciate you for taking the time to share your wisdom and knowledge. Brother Hugh, if I know that you do in addition to the Rites of Passage program, I know that you've done program mental health, emotional health programs for the brothers.
Yes, for the adults, for the men.
Yeah. So if someone wants to contact you because they're interested in the program or for therapy, how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, they can get me on my mobile number, 0203
Yeah.
701
Yeah.
2265.
Okay.
Or they can just drop me an email on emotionalinsights
Yeah.
at hotmail.co.uk.
All right. So I'm going to repeat that. So the number is 0203 701 2265. Email emotionalinsight at hotmail.co.uk. I'll make sure that they're also up on the Kemet FM website. Brother, blessings to you. I'm so appreciative. It's a really important topic. And yeah, give thanks.
No, thank you, Queen. Thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts and my ideas, man. Honor, every time, honor.
Oh, I'm so appreciative. I'm so appreciative.